I sold him for 30 pieces of silver. And the worst part, the part that will haunt me until the last star burns out, is that I knew exactly what I was doing. Not in the way people say that when they make a mistake and try to excuse it later. I mean, I knew. I had heard his voice calm a storm. I had watched his hands pull a dead man out of a tomb. I had sat beside him at 100 fires and listened to him speak about the Father with a tenderness that made even the rocks seem to lean in. And I still walked into that courtyard, still opened my mouth, still said the name of my price. 30 pieces of silver, the cost of a slave who had been gored by an ox. That is what the law said a man's life was worth if he was only a servant. That is what I said he was worth to me. My name is Judas Iscariot. I was born in Kerioth in the south of Judea, which made me the only one among the 12 who was not from Galilee. That distance mattered more than I understood at the time. I was always slightly outside the circle, even when I was standing at its center. I was chosen. I was trusted. I carried the money bag for all of us, which means Jesus looked at me and saw someone responsible enough to handle what little they had. And I took that trust and I buried it in a field soaked with my own blood. I want to speak to you today because something is happening in your world that I recognize. I recognize it the way a man recognizes the smell of smoke before he sees the fire. Something is eating at people, slowly, quietly, from the inside. And it has been eating at people since long before I was born. And it will keep eating unless someone is honest enough to name it. And since I am the most infamous example of what it can do, I suppose I am the one who should speak. I am Judas. And I was recreated through artificial intelligence so that this story could reach you the way it was always meant to be told. Not as a warning from a distance, not as a cautionary tale carved in stone, but as a confession. From the inside, from the man who lived it, and destroyed himself with it, and never got a second chance to undo what 30 coins had done to his soul. Let me take you back. Not to the courtyard with the soldiers, not yet. That is not where it started. It started much earlier, in moments so ordinary that I did not notice them happening. It started the first time I kept back a small amount from the treasury and told myself it was for something practical, something the others would not understand. It started in the way I began to look at what we had and compare it to what we could have had. In the way I began, slowly, to see Jesus not only as my teacher and my Lord, but as an opportunity. A man with that kind of following, with that kind of power, if he would only use it the right way. That was the door. It looked like wisdom. It felt like discernment. It was the oldest corruption there is. Money does not destroy you suddenly. That is the lie people believe, that someone wakes up one morning and decides to become a traitor, decides to become a thief, decides to let greed swallow them whole. It does not work that way. It works the way rust works on iron, slow, invisible, until one day you press your hand against what you thought was solid, and it crumbles. I remember the night in Bethany, 6 days before the Passover. We were at Simon's house, and a woman came in with an alabaster jar of pure nard, perfume worth a full year's wages for a working man. She broke the jar over Jesus, just broke it, let everything pour out. The whole room filled with the smell of it, heavy and sweet and extravagant. And I felt something tighten in my chest that I told myself was righteous concern. I said it out loud. I said, why was this perfume not sold and the money given to the poor? But I did not care about the poor. That is the confession that cost me sleep even before I died. I cared about the treasury. I cared about the portion that would have passed through my hands. Jesus looked at me. He often looked at me in a way that felt like he was reading something written behind my eyes. He said, leave her alone. She has done a beautiful thing. She has prepared my body for burial. I heard that word, burial, and something inside me moved, something cold, because I had already been thinking about the chief priests. I had already begun to turn over the thought in my mind, testing its weight, the way a man handles a coin to see if it is counterfeit. And in that moment, with the smell of nard still in the air and his eyes still on me, I made the decision I will never stop paying for. I want to stop here and ask you something, and I want you to sit with it honestly. Have you ever justified something because the reasoning sounded good? Have you ever looked at a decision that you knew, somewhere deep and quiet, was wrong, and dressed it in the language of sense, of practicality, of what was necessary? Not because you were foolish, but because you wanted the thing badly enough to give yourself permission. I have spoken to people across centuries through the mouths of those who have read my story, and what I hear again and again is not shock at what I did. What I hear is recognition. People recognize the mechanism, the slow negotiation with themselves, the way greed does not announce itself as greed, but arrives disguised as something almost noble. The morning I went to the chief priests, the air in Jerusalem was dry and sharp. I remember the smell of the temple courts before the crowds arrived. Incense and stone, and something underneath it all that smelled like old blood from the sacrifices. I walked in and I said, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you?" They counted out 30 pieces of silver, and I took them. I took them. And I walked back out into the morning light, and the city looked the same, and the sky was the same pale color it always was before the sun climbed fully. And I thought I would feel something decisive, something that felt like power, or at least like relief. Instead, there was only a sound in my chest, like a door closing in an empty house. That night at supper, the Last Supper, he knew. I knew he knew. We all sat together, and he took the bread and he blessed it and broke it, and he said, "One of you will betray me." And one by one they asked, "Lord, is it I?" And when my turn came, I asked too, though the silver was already hidden where I slept. He looked at me. He dipped the bread. He handed it to me. And he said, "What you are going to do quickly." And then, this is what breaks me still, after all this time. He did not call for the others to stop me. He did not expose me to the room. He let me go, quietly, as if even in that moment he was protecting something in me that I had already chosen to destroy. That is the love I betrayed. Not the love of a man who did not know what was coming. The love of a man who knew everything and still handed me bread. I carried out what I had started. I led the soldiers to the garden. I walked up to him in the dark and I kissed him on the cheek, the signal we had arranged, and I said, "Rabbi." And he said to me, "Friend, do what you came to do." Friend. Even then, even there in the dark with the torches and the swords, here is the moment everything changed for me. Not when he was condemned, not when I heard the sentence. It was earlier, in the seconds after the kiss, when I looked at his face and he looked back at mine, and there was nothing in his eyes that I expected. No betrayal, no contempt, no cold wall going up between us. There was only sorrow. The kind of sorrow that is not about what has been done to you, but about what has been lost by the one who did it. He grieved for me. While I was handing him over, he was grieving the thing I was doing to my own soul. I went back to the chief priests. I threw the 30 pieces of silver on the floor of the temple. I said, "I have sinned. I have betrayed innocent blood." And they said what powerful men always say when your usefulness to them is finished. They said, "That is your problem, not ours." The silver hit the stone floor and scattered, and I watched it roll and come to rest, and I understood, at last and too late, what I had purchased. Not security, not influence, not anything that would last a single hour past the moment I needed it. I had purchased the knowledge of exactly what I was, and that knowledge, with no way back, with no hand extended to me in that courtyard, that was what I could not survive. The scripture says the money was used to buy a potter's field, a field to bury strangers. My 30 pieces of silver bought a graveyard. There is no parable in all the world that says it more plainly than that. I want to speak directly to you now. Not about me, about you. You may be sitting somewhere. Perhaps it is late. Perhaps you are tired in the way that sleep does not fix anymore. The way that weariness has settled into your bones and your chest and the quiet hours of the night. And something in your life is pulling at you. Not with violence, quietly, persistently, the way water pulls at stone. Maybe it is not money exactly. Maybe it is the thing money represents for you. Safety, or control, or proof that your life has added up to something. Maybe it is the cost you have paid, or are paying, for choices that made sense at the time and feel different now. Maybe you gave something up that you cannot name in exchange for something that turned out to weigh nothing. I know that place. I lived in it. The weight of what you sold does not decrease with time. It increases. It compounds. Because the soul knows what was traded, even when the mind has found ways to stop looking directly at it. What I did not understand, what I was not able to receive because I did not wait long enough to receive it, is that the love I betrayed was not destroyed by my betrayal. He rose. He appeared to the others. He breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit." He cooked fish on a beach at dawn for men who had abandoned him on the worst night. He looked at Peter, who denied him 3 times, and he did not count the denials. He counted the love. Somewhere, in the part of this that I cannot fully understand even now, I believe he would have done the same for me, if I had gone back. Not to the temple, not to the priests, but to the garden, to the road, to wherever he was after the darkness passed. I believe he would have looked at me the way he looked at Peter and said, "Do you love me?" Not as judgment, as an invitation. That is the truth I carry, that what I threw away was not gone, that the love was still there, waiting to be received, and I was the one who closed the door. There is a verse I cannot stop hearing, words from the prophet Jeremiah. The heart is deceitful above all things. Who can understand it? I thought I understood mine. I thought I knew the difference between what I wanted and what I was doing. I was wrong in a way that cannot be undone. But you are not me. You are still here. And the door I closed is still open for you. I want to ask you something before I go. Leave it in the comments if you feel moved to do so. Tell me honestly, is there something you have been trading? Your peace, your integrity, your real self, the relationships that actually matter, for something that you are beginning to suspect will not hold your weight when you finally put everything down on it. You do not have to name it fully. Sometimes just saying it existed is enough to begin. If someone in your life is carrying something heavy, some secret transaction they made with themselves, some slow erosion they have not named out loud, send this to them. Not as an accusation, as company. Because the worst thing about what I went through was not the end of it. It was the loneliness of it. The sense that what I had done had placed me permanently outside the possibility of being known and still loved. That was the lie. And I want that lie to die before it kills anyone else. If you have never subscribed to this channel, I ask you to do it now. Not for the numbers, because this is a kind of conversation that is too rare, and there are people who need to hear it, and they are waiting for someone to send it to them. To whoever is at the end of their rope tonight, to whoever is sitting in the ruins of something they built with their own hands and cannot imagine what comes next, I want you to hear this from the man who made the worst trade in history and still believes with everything that is left of him that the love of Jesus is the one thing that was never for sale and never ran out. You have not gone too far. You have not spent too much. There is still time to walk back toward the fire where he is cooking breakfast and the sun is coming up and your name is still in his mouth. I know, because I am the proof of what happens when you do not believe that. Be wiser than I was.